Welcome everybody. Now this is a Boss Katana Mk II head, which I bought with my own money, and I'm really loving it, but I've always been curious about this 77 watts input and a claimed 100 watts output. So let's measure it. Just a brief rundown on the test setup. I've got an audio oscillator here, an oscilloscope, and we have an 8 ohm dummy load, which is the recommended load for this amplifier. And Boss do not quote any distortion figures for the 100 watts. So normally, if you're testing a hi-fi amplifier, they'd say something like 0.01% at 100 watts, and you would look for it to make both of those figures. In this case, we're just going to look for some flat topping distortion on the oscilloscope, and that'll give us a few percent error, but it'll be close enough for this purpose. And because we're not measuring particularly low distortions, this oscillator is perfectly fine. So let's go with that. I'm turning up the output level of the oscillator now to feeding into the power amp of the Boss Katana. Now you'll notice that the output is out of phase with the input, not quite 180 degrees. Okay, alright, starting a flat top there. I'm on the 100 watt setting, by the way, and we're getting about 65 volts, so let's say 64 volts peak to peak, and that's 22 volts cyclic RMS according to the Crow, although I don't know what algorithm it uses, so we'll use a calculator to work that out. Now, using my trusty pocket calculator, which doubles as a phone, we'll go with the let's just double check that, 64. I won't leave it running full bore. 64 volts peak to peak. So divide by 2 gives us peak voltage, and we multiply by root 212, which is 0.707, close enough. That gives us the RMS value from the peak value of a sine wave. Okay, so that's our RMS voltage. So if we use the V squared divided by R to calculate power, so we'll multiply that by itself, divided by 8 ohm dummy load, we get 64 watts, which I think is a pretty good number, considering that we're only putting in 77 watts. So if we divide that by 77, we'll see we've got about 83% efficiency, which is not bad. In fact, I'm quite impressed with that. And a bit later I'll show you the why 60 watts and 100 watts are virtually identical in a guitar amp. And while I'm here, I'll calculate, or I'll measure, in fact, the power on the 50 watt setting. I'll just change it to the 50 watt setting, and I'll turn the correct knob down here, and we'll wind it up. Maybe we should do this. And you'll see it's starting to clip again around about 64 volts, which is interesting. Now we'll go to the 500 milliwatt setting. I'll do it again. Okay, there we go. Same reading. So we can conclude from that the power amp is always a 65 watt power amp, regardless of what setting you put the power switch in, or the power control switch. So that implies that the power reduction is happening in DSP, so that they're doing some sort of limiting or compressing before it gets to the power amp. And that would explain why, to my ears, the 500 milliwatt setting always sounds a bit squishy. It's certainly loud enough for a bedroom or something, but it has a very squishy sound, whereas the other two sound a bit more open. Okay, interesting result. Because this is a high-tech show, and because I don't know how to do computer graphics yet, we're going to use the artificial intelligence robot arm to demonstrate decibels. The equation for decibels is dB equals 10 log P2 P1 rather over P2. Now we'll substitute in our powers. 10 log, our measured power here, our claimed power here, that equals 10 log 10 times minus 0.19, approximately to two figures, which comes out to be minus 1.9 dB. The minus just shows us that the 65 is quieter than the 100 by a factor of 1.9 decibels. Now that is virtually inaudible. You can hear 3 decibels, you can't very easily hear 2, and 1.9 is nearly 2. So there we have it. We didn't be disappointed with that result. It's less than claimed, but it's perfectly adequate and no one would be able to tell the difference anyway. So I hope you found that interesting, and hopefully I'll do some more interesting things in the future. Bye for now.